Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, I thank the witnesses for being here as well. And I anticipated that the chairman would speak to the domestic violent extremism that is rampant in our country right now. So I chose not to replow that ground for the most part, but I do want to make sure that the chairman and everyone knows that I agree with your comments. And we need to be mindful of that. I want to talk more about what I see as kind of the concern in the arena of the international extremism coming home here once again. And so our committee and the Department of Homeland Security were created to address terrorist threats facing the homeland. And it is incumbent upon us to remember precipitating events and warning signs which led to our existence. In 1993, a van containing over 1,000 pounds of explosives was detonated in a parking garage of the World Trade Center, killing 6 people and injuring 15 others. Ramzi Youssef, one of the plot's leaders and the nephew of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, later told the FBI he had hoped to topple one tower into the other, killing approximately 250,000 civilians. In 1998, 224 people died, including 12 Americans, when nearly simultaneous bombs blew up in front of the American embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. Soon after, these attacks were linked to Al-Qaeda. In 2000, the USS Cole was refueling off the coast of Yemen when suicide terrorists launched an attack, killing 17 American sailors. The U.S. government investigation determined that Al-Qaeda was behind the bombing. Less than a year later, on a Tuesday morning in September, America learned exactly what Al-Qaeda was capable of. And now, 20 years after 9/11, terrorist safe havens still exist in locations spanning from West Africa to, sadly, once again, Afghanistan. I understand that Americans are exhausted by endless wars, but we must remember wars are two-sided. The terrorist threat will not cease because we pick up and leave. We need to recognize that while it is possible to degrade terrorist operations when we utilize the power of American intelligence and military enterprises, it is just as easy for terrorism to reconstitute when it is given sanctuary. And that is my concern today. The war on terror is not a war which is going to end with a treaty signing and a ticker tape parade. And it's not a war which we have won or lost. In fact, it's not over and probably never will be. However, the Biden administration has seemingly disengaged to some extent. The Biden administration's botched withdrawal from Afghanistan has cost the lives of 13 service members and has reinvigorated terrorist networks in the region and around the world. We must be clear-eyed about what is an evolving threat landscape and admit the failures that happened in Afghanistan. There are 2 lessons we must learn from past experience. The first is, given safe haven, terrorist networks will undoubtedly utilize that time and space to plot attacks against the homeland that are more intricate in nature. The second lesson is that we cannot ignore the signals foreign terrorist organizations are now sending. Many of these warning signs are seen internationally, but many are also seen here at home, unfortunately. Just 2.5 weeks ago, a British citizen named Malik Fazal Akram barricaded himself along with several hostages inside the Congregation Beth Israel Synagogue in Colleyville, Texas. Akram demanded the release of Afia Siddiqui, a terrorist who has been tried and convicted of attempting to kill U.S. officers in Afghanistan. As American citizens, we are incredibly grateful to our brave federal, state, and local law enforcement agents for their actions during this incident. But we cannot take this outcome for granted. Having experienced the Naval Air Station Pensacola shooting just a couple of years ago, we know that these attacks can be deadly. I am, to say the least, concerned about how Akram was able to obtain clearance through the visa waiver program. He clearly had a troubled past and a very serious criminal record, and the British knew about that. At a minimum, this should have triggered a heightened level of screening and vetting. Why it did not is something we need to examine and discuss. These are issues which I'm addressing with the Department of Homeland Security and their agency partners, but which we all should be considering as we influence Homeland Security policy. Additionally, the troubling lack of clear communication, information sharing, and effectiveness displayed by Homeland Security among its interagency partners and Congress during recent events such as one in Colleyville gives me cause for continuing concern. The terror threat is one that we face on many fronts. We cannot ignore the battlefields in the Middle East, Afghanistan, and Africa. We must be cognizant of the growth of extremism in the West and work with our international partners to identify and neutralize the threat there. We must arm our Homeland Security colleagues with the tools they need to recognize the threat at ports of entry and keep those actors from making it to the interior of the United States. And finally, we must combat the threat of terrorism, whether foreign-born or homegrown, as my colleague Mr. Thompson pointed out, or domestic, which exists within our borders. If we don't maintain a holistic approach to combating this threat, we will face more acts of terror on American soil. And I hope that we can work together in this committee in a bipartisan manner we always do to get things done and continue to attack these very difficult problems. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I